Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now obviously 2016 is already a very big year for Warner Brothers because that will see the release of Superman vs. Batman, which is already dominating the headlines 2 years out, with of course Zack Snyder's reveal of not just the Batmobile as he teased, but also Ben Affleck himself in his very Frank Miller-y Batsuit. However, another announcement that Warner Brothers has just made, which doesn't have quite the same traction, yet I think is no less important, is that Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them will also hit theaters in 2016, November 18th to be exact. Now, of course, that is the spin-off to the Harry Potter franchise, and the reason I think it's equally important, not just because these are two very valuable properties for Warner Brothers in terms of merchandising and fan appeal, the DC Comics line and also Harry Potter, but because it's going to be Warner Brothers' attempt to build cinematic universes. Now, of course, over with Superman versus Batman. I keep wanting to call it Batman versus Superman, but with Superman versus Batman, Man of Steel might have been the first step, but this will be the film that not only has the new Batman they're going to be using going forward, ideally, hopefully this will all click. I think it probably will, though, with Ben Affleck. But then also the Justice League members will be at least popping up here in some way as we lead directly into their Justice League film, which I believe is set for 2018 at this point. And Zack Snyder, which I believe is a mistake, is helming both films, which is slowing them down a little bit in terms of Warner Brothers' ability to produce them. But anyway, maybe perhaps the reason that the DC films are getting more attention is because they've taken shape more, whereas Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, really we only know that J.K. Rowling, for the first time, will be writing her own screenplays. But anyway, this is set for the traditional Harry Potter release date. Some of them came out in the summer, but they really did very well. They excelled quite well at the November release date. Harry Potter's always been a great holiday movie because it's very cozy. And we'll see if Fantastic Beasts is able to do that as well. Now, of course, that's world building, cinematic universe building for the Harry Potter franchise, because it's not a direct prequel. Instead, it is, just taking place in the same world as Harry Potter, as all Potter fans already know. This, of course, will be the adventures of Newt Scamander, a Hogwarts student long before Harry and his friends came along, and who actually they end up being assigned his textbook quite famously. J.K. Rowling wrote the book itself as a spin-off, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, a fun side project to be able to read one of Harry's textbooks, and now here it is becoming an entire movie franchise itself. And this is just part of what Warner Brothers is doing to really make sure they solidify Harry Potter as an ongoing property for them, not something they had to wrap and tuck away and put to bed. And then, of course, just like Disney, who I think Warner Brothers and DC are in very strict competition these days with their properties, and that they both have theme parks. Now, Warner Brothers doesn't really so much have specific theme parks like Disney does, the whole Disney branding, the whole thing, but they do have theme park properties. For instance, there's the Universal stuff, which we'll get to in a moment, but there's a Harry Potter tour that you can take at, I believe it's Leavesden Studios. I think they bought one, Warner Brothers bought one of the big studio lots out in the UK, in London, outside London. I forget which one exactly it is, but they did purchase it. They renamed it. It's like the Warner Brothers Leavesden Studios, I think, or something like that. And if you go out there, you can take a tour of the actual sets that they shot on. So it's a whole experience that you can, buy a ticket to. And so that's kind of like a highbrow theme park attraction almost. Now, in terms of Universal, of course, everybody is aware of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. Huge, big event, big deal, and actually has drawn a lot of business away from Disney to the point where down in Orlando, Disney, that's the whole reason they had their Fantasyland expansion, to combat the competition coming from Wizarding World of Harry Potter. So now, of course, Universal and Warner Brothers have to, fire back, and that's what their new Harry Potter expansion set to open this summer called Diagon Alley, and that's of course the shopping district in London where you can go and buy your things if you're not going to actually go to Hogwarts. And they're actually very cleverly going to be in two different theme parks. So if you want to visit both of the Harry Potter worlds, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, where Hogwarts is, and then if you want to go to Diagon Alley, you have to buy a two-park one-day pass, or you have to at least, over the course of 2 days or longer days, but you have to buy tickets for 2 parks. And if you want to ride the Hogwarts Express, you do need that ticket as well. I'll be very interested to see how fans feel about that kind of, uptick in the price, and that, I don't think it's really the most fan-friendly setup. I mean, you could understand from a business perspective why they're doing it. I think with Wizarding World of Harry Potter, no one's going over to Universal Studios Orlando. They're all going to Islands of Adventure. There are 2 parks in Orlando, if you're not familiar with that setup. So they need to find a way to get people to go back to the other theme park. But still, to have to buy, 2 tickets to experience, one world, so to speak, I think is a little bit underhanded in my opinion. But I'm going. I'm definitely going to go and see it as soon as I can. My family's planning on going down there. We're very excited. But I'm also going to check out the Snow White, Seven Dwarfs Mine roller coaster in the Fantasyland expansion, the final part of that. So I guess, just like it's a good time to be a moviegoer, it's a good time to be a theme park attendee. But if you're interested in this new Diagon Alley, I've included a link in the video description to a video behind the scenes for the new ride that will be there, and it's called Escape from Gringotts. That's, of course, the bank, which is a big, I forget the exact movie it's in. It's a big set piece. It's a big action-adventure set piece, and so they're going to recreate that. It seems to me, based on this video, that it's going to be a lot like the ride that already exists in Wizarding World of Harry Potter right now, which is going to be heavily reliant on screens, 3D screens, and you move around the screen to create an effect of being on a ride, but in actuality, you're just in a big room. It's the same kind of technology used to great effect in the Spider-Man ride, also in Universal Islands of Adventure, and I think to some degree Soarin' as well in Epcot. I'm using the Orlando frame of reference. I know in Los Angeles these rides are in a few different places. But, I love the first Harry Potter ride. I got the chance to ride it. I spent a whole day in Harry Potter Land, as I like to call it. The lines were ridiculously long for the rides. It was insane. But the queues were a fun experience. To actually walk through Hogwarts was pretty fantastic. And I'd be curious to anyone else who's been to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, any of the locations, did you think it was worth the time and the money? But of course, I think that with both these movies coming out in 2016, and by the way, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them looks like we'll be competing with Zootopia, the 2016 Disney animation entry. So that'll be a very interesting clash. But Zootopia is kind of like a Richard Scarry kind of, little caper with a fox and a bunny on the run. I don't think that they can compete with a new Harry Potter film, which will also have lots of animals, but ones that are dangerous and breathe fire and do magical things. I'm very curious, and I expect people to be more interested in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them once the director is attached, and of course they cast Newt Scamander. A great role, and of course he'll be an older character, so I think they can have a little more fun with this series, and maybe can broaden their demographic a little bit beyond families and Potter fans. So that's the first story of the day, and I'm curious to how you guys feel about those 2 properties. Do you think those put Warner Brothers in good shape? And do you have more interest in one or the other? And why do you think Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them isn't quite as big a deal yet? Do you agree with me because it hasn't taken as much shape? And do you think that it could possibly be as good as the Harry Potter films? Do you think that without Harry, Hermione, and Ron, will people be as interested in that series of films? All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story is that recently we talked about The Social Network and how Aaron Sorkin and Scott Rudin were reteaming for the Steve Jobs movie, both at Sony, and that they had wanted to keep David Fincher in the mix as the director as well, but he bailed. Rumor is over salary issues. But regardless, I said, this would be a great technology trilogy for Sony to have. First Mark Zuckerberg, then Steve Jobs, and who should be the third entry? And one of you very cleverly said Edward Snowden. Well, it looks like Sony was listening, or at least was on the same train of thought, because they have just optioned the rights to the book written by, let's see here, Glenn Greenwald, the journalist from The Guardian over in the UK, who did, award-winning coverage of Edward Snowden and has compiled that in a book called No Place to Hide: Edward Snowden, the NSA, and the U.S. Surveillance State. Ooh, a lot of headlines there and a lot of controversial statements. It sounds very interesting. If you're the kind of person who likes to read the book before you see the movie, you might want to go out and get that. But Sony has got the rights. I'd be curious if they're talking to Sorkin and Rudin about writing and producing that film. If I were them, I would be. I think the trilogy, you can just see the packaging on the shelf. I think a technology trilogy is a really smart way to go. And just as you guys have said yourselves, those 3 people are quite influential in today's technology age. But if Rudin and Sorkin are going to join in, they have to work with the team behind the Bond movies. Barbara Broccoli and her co-producers have signed on as well to make this film, and that's very interesting. They usually just focus on the Bond films. The Broccoli's own the rights to the Bond franchise. They will always be in the mix there. But the Snowden film is very interesting. I think I see while it does tie in to The Social Network and Steve Jobs, and to his credit, to be fair, Both Steve Jobs, actually, and Mark Zuckerberg were both very controversial figures, but no one is quite as controversial as Edward Snowden. Perhaps Julian Assange might be a better parallel. And of course, The Fifth Estate did not do well. The Fifth Estate, though, had problems as a film beyond just the subject matter. It was very TV movie of the week. I thought that Benedict Cumberbatch's performance was good, but a little over the top. And I thought that the film perhaps was a little bit too broad in its scope and not sophisticated enough. I thought that it made Julian Assange seem a little sophomoric and out of his league, which maybe was the case, but I don't know. The film just didn't click. I was not a fan of it at any level. But anyway, the problems that film had beyond just, the creative and technical issues was that you're dealing with a character who, it's a very gray area, whether or not this person is a hero or a traitor. And Edward Snowden, I think, also exists in that same gray area. So some people could feel that going to see a movie about him, there's something, maybe even if they're not sure about whether or not they want to support him or not, they might just not want to get involved in the conversation, which I think to some degree hurt The Fifth Estate. So that is a big obstacle for Sony and whoever they bring on board here, along with Barbara Broccoli and her team, to make this film, to show people that they need to really see this movie and that they should need to see what happened. Because, of course, this is a historic event, what happened with Edward Snowden, the biggest government leak of all time, and he created a lot of problems. It's almost like the next step after Julian Assange. But, the government was able to sideline Julian Assange quite effectively. One of the most interesting things, I think, about The Fifth Estate, and I wish they had underlined this more, was that it showed that the powers that be stay in power for a reason, and that they're very, very, they're very vicious, and they move very quickly and very effectively. And I think that revolutionaries tend to underestimate them as opponents. They tend to think of them as slow and, left in the past, and they don't understand that you really are, it's like waking a sleeping giant. So I hope this Snowden biography would explore that. So I'm curious, would you see an Edward Snowden movie? Do you think this is a great trilogy for Sony? And do you think Snowden is an appropriate subject matter for a movie? So write your thoughts down below on that. All right, so the third story of the day is that the Cannes Film Festival has gotten underway. And the first big movie to come out of it is Grace of Monaco, or at least it was supposed to be. Harvey Weinstein did not attend the premiere. He said he had a humanitarian prior commitment, but they did agree to. The Weinstein Company has agreed to release the film in the United States. There was some question as to whether or not they would. He and the director Olivier Dahan, who did La Vie en Rose, great film by the way, put Marion Cotillard on the global map in terms of films, at least, the film industry. She really is, made her a global celebrity, I guess, to some degree, or at least a global name that everybody's heard or recognizes or kind of knows what they're talking about. I don't know how much of a star Marion Cotillard actually is, but still, Olivier Dahan is a very talented filmmaker. But he and Harvey Weinstein got into quite a lot of arguments about the cut of the film, and they seem to have kind of come to terms, and someone even asked Olivier Dahan a question about that at the press conference at Cannes, and Dahan said, the version we're showing today at the festival will be the one that's released, and if there are any changes made, Harvey and I will come to agreement on them together. But anyway, so they were able to squash the behind-the-scenes controversy to put the movie front and center, but unfortunately it wasn't particularly well received. Not very good reviews, certainly no glowing reviews. Some were very negative, some, milk-warm, milk-toast, lukewarm. I combined them to create a new word for not great. And then also, the royal family of Monaco obviously isn't too pleased about the movie's existence either. But not to the point either. It's also kind of a lukewarm distaste or anger. They're not angry enough to make headlines. And so I think that Grace of Monaco, pushed back out of last year's awards competition, really is going to end up being a non-story and probably won't be a big contender either. Maybe in costume design and the like. And it's just, it's an example of how, all this fighting over basically nothing. And, you should never assume that you have a hot film until you actually do. And so it's just too bad. But look for more news to come out of the Cannes Film Festival. If any film's able to get some buzz. Of course, this is where Bruce Dern for Nebraska got a lot of attention last year and started his kind of Oscar march. He didn't win, but he got the nomination. And certainly a lot of attention, a second wind or a third wind to his career. Tarantino started to take an interest in him. I believe Tarantino was a judge at Cannes last year, and that's where their relationship bloomed. So even if you don't get to see a lot of headlines coming out of Cannes, things are happening. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. The viewer question comes from Demario0708 and says, "Hey Grace, question. How big a role do the DVD and Blu-ray sales play in a movie's financial success, and do companies take this into account when thinking of sequels and reboots? Thanks. No problem, DeMario. This actually kind of plays into a question I did the other day. Somebody asked about how studios decide if they're going to make a sequel. And I did mention that DVD and Blu-ray sales do factor in. That was one of the 4 things that factored into sequels being done. Box office and the ancillary market, which includes DVDs, streaming, playing on television, etc. Merchandising was the 3rd. And then also buzz, if Hollywood thought they had maybe a missed opportunity. If people were rooting for it to succeed, and maybe they could make it succeed on the next go around. But anyway, the reason I selected this question anyway for today is because I wanted to just talk specifically about DVD and Blu-ray sales. These have really gone away, and it's another reason you've seen the death of the mid-range movie, because there just simply isn't any support for it financially. Those movies used to do pretty good box office, they would do pretty good DVD and Blu-ray sales, and that would help fund Hollywood movies. Also, the big movies would do very well on Blu-ray and DVD sales, and that would help pay for the smaller movies. Basically, for a long time, DVD and Blu-ray, which I think one of the reasons that Hollywood wanted to upgrade to Blu-ray with a higher price point, was that was a big source of income for the studios and really funded a lot of what they were able to do. But thanks to streaming, and while comic books, by the way, went digital, but the prices didn't go down, movies that go on streaming and rental and on demand, etc., are cheaper. And that has really taken up a lot of money away from Hollywood. And it's one of the things that's responsible for really changing the business model. So I think it's really a fascinating aspect of the business. And it's one of those things where technology, you see stores go away. There are no more record stores. There are no more bookstores. And there are no mid-range movies because people just don't buy DVDs really anymore. It's really become a niche market. Everybody has things on their cloud. And I would actually wager, when you can't actually physically own it, the whole appeal of owning it, I think, goes away immensely. Also, people used to buy DVDs or Blu-rays, at least I did, and I think a number of people, I got this feeling as well, would buy them so they could own them. Because once they went away, they went away. Disney had a whole campaign when they'd be like, it's in the vault! You won't be able to see it for years if you don't buy it now. But thanks to streaming, movies are so accessible, you don't really feel a need to rush to purchase it. Because you can always get it. It's always there. And so I think to some degree, that ease of access has also hurt the sales industry for Hollywood. So thank you for your question, DeMario. Thank you everybody for tuning in today. Please write down below what you think of today's three top stories, the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.